This is probably one of the saddest stories that I have done on the show in months because it's the sort of perfect storm of incompetence, arrogance, misinformation, disinformation, pseudoscience. The new head of FEMA didn't know that there's such a thing as hurricane season, the time of year when in the northern hemisphere in the United States, there are more hurricanes, when the hurricanes are concentrated. This is not satire. This is not The Onion. This is not Newsmax trying to be funny. This is the guy in charge of disaster response for the United States under Donald Trump, Trump's FEMA administrator, allegedly saying he didn't know that we had such a thing called hurricane season, the one that happens every year. It's on disaster planning calendars and meteorological documents. It starts in June and it's expected to be worse than usual this year. Now, Reuters broke the story. David Richardson, Trump's FEMA chief, told staff during a briefing this week he didn't know that the United States had a thing called hurricane season, and FEMA employees in the room were understandably stunned. Multiple sources said they thought it might have been a joke, like this has to be a joke, right? But nobody was laughing because this is the guy who's supposed to be leading the country through natural disasters. And we've got to be clear about who this guy is because that's a big part of the story. Richardson has no experience in disaster response, but he's leading the Federal Emergency Management Agency. He's a former Marine artillery guy who until last month was working on countering weapons of mass destruction at the Department of Homeland Security. And apparently he still has that job, but he's also running FEMA and doesn't know there's a thing as hurricane season. Now, Trump's last FEMA chief, Cameron Hamilton, was abruptly fired after opposing Trump's plan to dismantle the agency. Now we have Richardson, a true loyalist to Trump, no background in emergency management. He's cracking jokes or not about not knowing that hurricane season exists. Now, meanwhile, we do have actual professionals, emergency planners, meteorologists, responders. They're panicking. NOAA has forecasted an above average hurricane season, up to 19 named storms, 10 hurricanes, 5 potentially major, 5 major hurricanes expected. And this comes after Donald Trump laid off nearly 2,000 FEMA employees and then another 600 from the National Weather Service. And to make matters even worse, FEMA's slashing hurricane training, travel, disaster workshops. Some National Weather Service offices, including the tornado-prone state offices, are closed overnight. Forecasting accuracy expected to drop. This is a classic. Oh, they're terrible at weather forecasting. Well, they're terrible because Trump slashed positions. Well, let's close the whole thing down. So now you look at places like Houston and Nashville. They are 35% understaffed. There are memos warning our forecasts are going to get worse. And Trump's solution is gut the agency and put a guy in charge who doesn't even know hurricane season exists. Now, we've talked over the very long decade that Trump's been in politics about qualifications and expertise and what that means. And this really isn't about being unqualified. This is way more than that. This is actively undermining government preparedness for political reasons, because Trump has already come to the conclusion before doing the stuff. Trump has said, oh, FEMA should be dismantled. Republicans are floating bills to eliminate it. Just give everything over to the states. And there's one House Republican who's introduced legislation to abolish FEMA. Nobody is co-sponsoring it, thankfully. So don't think for a second that this isn't dangerous, because these are the people who say, we care about law and order. We care about saving lives. We care about protecting Americans. But they cut agencies that enforce law and order, save lives, and protect Americans. And here it's one that does it when there are hurricanes or wildfires or tornadoes or floods or whatever else. And so Democratic leaders are furious. Chuck Schumer's furious. Okay, that makes sense that they should be furious. But they need to understand that this is not about incompetence. This is sabotage. They're not failing at the job. They're refusing to do the job. They're putting people in who can't do the job and don't want to do the job. And the goal is always prove that it doesn't work. Prove that government doesn't work. Break it from the inside. Break education to then say we don't need the Department of Education because this thing sucks. Break the Postal Service to then say we shouldn't be in the business of the Postal Service, even though it's not a business, as the government because it sucks. This is a very long held strategy. They do it with social safety nets. They do it with all of these things. And the idea is prove it doesn't work and then dismantle it. If a hurricane slams into the Gulf Coast this summer and FEMA's response is delayed or inadequate or non-existent, you think Trump is going to say, hey, you know what? It's my fault. I cut FEMA. I cut National Weather Service. Of course not. He's never done it. He would go, it's Biden's fault, or it's the deep state, or it's shadowy forces conspiring against me, or it's the states themselves, especially if they're blue states. Whoever they can scapegoat is going to be the problem. But they're setting this up to fail on purpose. And so this is more than an absurd comment. It's governing has become a joke. And if people's lives end up being lost, it's collateral damage. The main thing is to show that none of these systems work. So a big oh no, because this hurricane season is expected to be really bad. And we are quickly learning that these clueless staffing choices are not just theoretical. They are putting people at risk. It is not just FEMA. We looked at so many other examples. Trump has packed the government with ideologues from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at Health and Human Services, an anti-vaxxer leading public health. They pulled in Dr. Marty McCary. We talked about this yesterday. He's been spreading COVID vaccine disinformation on TV. So sometimes we say, president gets to pick who he wants, and it's just kind of what it is. These are not harmless figureheads. They are people responsible for disaster response, disease prevention, and emergency preparedness. And so it's all theoretical. What's that thing Mike Tyson is credited with saying? Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. It's sort of that thing. And when FEMA's chief doesn't know when hurricane season starts or that it exists, and the guy running HHS is coming up with whatever position on raw milk, who the hell knows? This isn't just embarrassing. This can be deadly. These are decisions with real consequences. And in a sense, if we were a sane population that said, oh, I'm getting data, let me synthesize that data to make a conclusion, we would go, apparently all of this stuff about the federal government being bloated, overblown, and doing unnecessary stuff, I guess that's not true. Because as Trump guts agency after agency after agency, we see the real world consequences. And of course, then we go, they gutted it on purpose. That's bad. And we're paying the price. Let's vote these people out. That would be in a sane world. I don't know that we have a sane world right now.